Hi, I'm Gary Striegler, the president of CNS Custom Homes, an author for Fine Home Building Magazine, and woodworking instructor. Well, what I really am is just a carpenter that gets a whole lot of cell phone calls. People who know me well will tell you that I've got two hobbies: going to trade shows and buying tools. About 10 years ago, I found a tool that has really made a difference in the way I do work. If you look around and get all the detailing you see here, it was almost all created using a very simple concept: pocket hole joinery. What that allows me to do is put frames together, then add molding to get this type of detailing. This type of detailing is what really has made a difference in my work. It transforms me from just one of the guys bidding on the job to the contractor of choice. If you look around, you'll see things like mantles, panel detailing under windows, storage units, and panel jambs. This house is almost done, but we want to go down the street and take a look at another one I've got under construction. I want to show you how simple it is to create these type of details using pocket hole joinery. That's the first step in making a pocket hole joint. I made that hole using a really special drill bit. It's a two-step drill bit. The first step is it drills a pilot hole on the end, and the second step is it creates a flat bottom hole. That flat bottom hole is really important because these screws function as a mini clamp. If you look at that screw, you'll see that it has a flat bottom on it. That comes in contact with the flat bottom hole that I made here to create the maximum clamping pressure. The pilot hole allows me to line up and go through into the joint using this special self-tapping screw tip. So whenever I'm making this joint, I'm only going to have to deal with this one board. Unlike a lot of other methods of joinery, I'm going to make my cuts on this board, and now I'm ready to put the joint together. I'm going to go ahead and put a little glue on the end of this board that I'm joining, but you probably don't have to. In my experience, the pocket hole joint is as strong as a biscuit or a dowel, even without the glue. As a builder, one of the things I really like, as soon as I drive that screw, this joint's ready to go. Also, I get a really good flat surface here. When I started using pocket screws, I cut down my sanding time by about 50%. It just always gets you a really flat joint on the front. The clamp helps you do that. Now, there's a couple things that are important that you need to know. Those screws do create a tremendous clamping pressure. That means if I've cut this board at 2 degrees off, it's going to pull the joint together at 2 degrees off. Also, it's really important that this edge that I'm screwing to be square. In other words, it's going to pull that joint together at a degree off if you're not square. So take a little bit of time, make sure when you prepare your stock that you have square edges and that you're cutting square with your boards. Another important thing about pocket hole joinery, you always want to be driving the screws into the edge of the board. Your pocket holes should always be in the end of a board, and you don't ever want to be driving screws into the end grain. Something else that I really like about this method of joining wood, I can take a piece as small as 1 1/4 inches and still get 2 holes in it. The way that I used to make this joint, I would have had a cut coming out each side of this board. I can also join a wide board very easily. Another thing that I really like about using pocket screws to put together joints, I get to deal with each joint individually. So when I'm putting the pieces of a face frame together, I don't have to worry about getting all the joints pulled together and then clamping them and waiting for the glue to dry before I can unclamp it. Okay, we've talked a lot about the most common joint, the face frame joint. But there's another joint that I do a lot also when I'm building architectural millwork details in the house I built, and that is attaching two boards at a right angle. We do that a lot of times when we want to give a depth look to things. For instance, like maybe building a pilaster on a fireplace. So I'm going to go over to another machine where I can rapidly drill these holes. Another important thing to remember, you don't want to drill these holes any closer than an inch to the end or it may split out the board. There's two ways that I can make this joint. One would be that I can use a special clamp called a right angle clamp. I'm going to go ahead and put some glue in this. Especially on an application like this, to a certain degree the glue acts as filler. And again, I'm only going to get as good a joint as I've prepared the surface of the two boards. Okay. Again, this right angle clamp has a peg that fits right into the pocket hole. I'll adjust that just a little bit. I like to leave the board back just a little bit so that I can flush trim it with a router later. What I'll do is put a screw on either side of where I have the clamp. Boy, you can see how that's pulling that joint together. There's a lot of times when I do this application where I may be putting together 8-foot long boards. Now you can imagine how many clamps it would take to do that. But using the right angle clamp and the pocket screws, I've got a whole series of clamps that hold it together, and I'm ready to do the next step immediately. Another way to make this joint is using the bench clamp, which is going to hold the board down while I put the pocket screws in. And really all that's doing is holding things in alignment for me because the screws are pulling the joint together. Now that's ready to wipe the glue out and either flush trim it or sand it. This is another joint that we do pretty regularly using pocket screws, and it's another use for the bench clamp. As you can see, the bench clamp is pushing down on this molding and keeping that molding just as tight as it can be down to the work table. The pocket screw is pulling the piece of plywood down tight against it so that when I'm done, I end up with a very flush joint on the top side. Again, a lot of times you're adding long pieces of molding to things like shelves, or another example where we'd use this application would be putting a molded edge on the front of a fireplace mantle. If this piece were going to be used as a shelf, we'd want to fill these holes. Kreg makes special plugs for that purpose. They fit in like this. Of course, I'd want to have some glue in it if I was going to leave it in there permanently. Then they can either be sanded down, or sometimes I'll use a router to route it very close to the surface and then finish sand it. Those plugs are available in several species of wood to match whatever type of material you're using if it's stain grade work. Well, we've really only started to talk about all the applications that you can use pocket screws for. What I really liked about what first caught my attention when the first time I ever saw a Kreg jig was it allowed me to use the same technology that they were using in high production cabinet shops. Still a simple concept. You use a special drill bit to create a pocket, and then you put the joint together using a special screw that's designed to exert a lot of clamping pressure. And again, for me, the greatest benefit is you put the joint together, you get a joint that needs very little sanding, and it's a strong joint you're ready to work with right away. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this material, don't forget to like and subscribe.